Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us this evening. This is John. I am the event coordinator here at Murder by the Book in Houston. And before we get into our event tonight, I just wanted to make a couple of quick store announcements and let everybody know what is going on with us and kind of give everybody time to get that live notification and click over and find us. So first up, if you haven't come to visit us at the store in a while, we are open. We are now hosting some in-store events and virtual events. So when you look at the store's calendar online, things are going to be either listed as in-store or virtual. And of course, we have the general disclaimer that all of the in-store stuff is scheduled as of today. As you guys know, in the last year, stuff can change in a second. So just kind of keep an eye on the newsletter and the website to see what is going on. Next up tomorrow, we're going to have Michelle Helen Klump in the store at 3 o'clock. She's got a new cozy mystery that is set in Houston. And then next Wednesday, Mark Greeny is going to be in store. We've got virtual events coming up with Abby Collette next Monday. She's going to be chatting with Sarah DeVello, Deanna Rayburn next week, Joe Ide. So lots of great stuff coming up. So please make sure that you check out the store's calendar for that. If you do come to the in-store events, we do ask that you please mask up when you come in. If you've been to the store, you'll know that the seating area is not the biggest. So we have told publishers and authors that we would require masks for in-store events, just so everybody feels comfortable. We're doing things slightly differently. We're setting up the chairs a little bit more spread out so you have a little bit more room, and calling in smaller groups as you come up to get your books signed, just so everybody has a little bit more space and everybody feels comfortable. For the most part, all the signings are still happening normal. The authors will do talks and then you can get their book signed. If anything is going to be different for an event, we will have that listed on the event website. So I think that gets us through all of our basic store stuff. Tonight, we're so excited to be celebrating the release of Homicide and Halo-Halo by Mia P. Manansala. And she is going to be chatting with Kellye Garrett, who's got Like a Sister coming out in March. So I'm going to get them brought out. Oops, we have lost Mia. Oh, she's popping back in. So I'm going to start with Mia just to make sure everything is working.
Hey,
can you hear me?
Sorry about that. StreamYard kicked me out. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can.
Okay. Hello.
Okay. You can hear me? Everything's good?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So congratulations on the new book. Happy new release week.
Thank you.
Also wanted to mention, so I don't forget, we do have, like we did for Arsenic and Adobo, we have signed book plates, stickers, and bookmarks to go with Homicide and Halo-Halo. So if you have not ordered your copy from Murder by the Book, if you do, you will get all of that swag to go with it. So as I said, it just came out on Tuesday. Officially, Mia P. Manansala is a writer from Chicago who loves books, baking, and badass women. She uses humor and murder to explore the aspects of Filipino diaspora, queerness, and her millennial love for pop culture. She is the winner of the 2018 Hugh Holton Award, the 2018 Eleanor Taylor Bland Crime Fiction Writers Award of Color, the 2017 William F. Deeck-Malice Domestic Grant for Unpublished Writers, and the 2016 Mystery Writers of America Helen McCloy Scholarship. She is also a 2017 Pitch Wars alum and a 2018 and 19 mentor. Also wanted to mention, if you want to hear her talk a little bit more about Arsenic and Adobo, you can go back through the store's Facebook channel and you'll be able to hear about that. Next, I'm going to bring out Kellye Garrett. How are you tonight, Kellye?
I'm good. How are you guys? Thanks for having me.
Good. It's good to see you.
Good to see you as always, John.
So Kellye's newest book is called Like a Sister, and we're so excited it's going to be out March 18th, so not long. As I'm sure if you guys are online at all, you've seen this book is everywhere, and we're so excited for it to come out and be able to get to talk about it as well. So I'm sure as they're chatting, we'll get to hear a little bit more about it. But officially, Kellye Garrett is the acclaimed author of Hollywood Homicide, which won the Agatha, Anthony, Lefty, and Independent Publisher IPPY awards for Best First Novel, and was named one of BookBub's top 100 crime novels of all time, as well as Hollywood Ending, which was featured on the Today Show's Best Summer Reads of 2019, and was nominated for both Anthony and Lefty awards. Prior to writing novels, Kellye spent 8 years working in Hollywood, including a stint writing for Cold Case. She currently serves on the board of directors for Sisters in Crime and is also a I cannot read tonight. A co-founder of Crime Writers of Color, and I'll drop a link for Crime Writers of Color in the comments for everybody, so you guys can check them out. They're a great organization. If you have questions for Mia or Kellye while they are chatting, please make sure you post those in the live chat on YouTube or the comments on Facebook. As an added bonus, Mia is going to do a giveaway of a copy of her book and Kellye's book. So whoever asks the best question will win a copy of that. So get your questions ready.
Uh-oh. Make it PG though.
Yeah, definitely PG. Definitely PG questions that they would want to answer and have recorded on the internet forever. So I will keep that in mind while I'm picking as well. So like I said, if you guys have those questions, please make sure you post those in the comments. I'll be watching behind the scenes and checking those out. But for now, I'm going to turn it over to Kellye and Mia and let them chat. And I will see y'all in just a little bit.
Thanks, John. Okay, so first off, you have to update your bio. Because you need to add Agatha and Lefty award nominated, not award will come soon, a nominated author. Congratulations on that.
Yeah. Ugh. I know. It just feels weird to, I don't know, like I'm really excited, but I almost don't want to jinx. I mean, like I know like it's just saying nominated, but I'm just like, it's kind of
even being nominated is such a, like so many books come out every year and especially debuts. And so to be nominated in both those categories, because I feel like there's, only a handful of major mystery awards. And I think Lefty and Agatha are two of them. So proud of you.
Thank you. Just following in your footsteps.
As I
remember, somebody wept their debut year. So
can I tell you, my first awards was the Lefties, and I think I told you this. I was so nervous I couldn't talk to anybody. I was a hot mess. So I'm sure you'll be way more together when you go to the Lefties next month. So
Kellye, do you not know me by now?
All right, so let's get into these conversations. Let's not just have a personal conversation like we normally have. So I am actually, like, I think at this point 5 years and 3 books in, and I still forget that I'm not a debut author. And so you're officially no longer a debut author. So how do you feel now that you have like 2 under your belt? And I think you finished the 3rd one, right? You just haven't published it yet.
Yeah, I actually, like, just today before this, like my editors were like, for my book 3 edits, like we thought we were done, but they had like 2 last minute questions before they transmitted it. So like I completed like the main edits on book 3 like this morning.
And there's an excerpt in here too, if you guys can get the book.
So like if I'm a little frazzled, if I'm a little like, I don't know. And it just, what you said, it was so weird to me that I'm not a debut anymore. I don't know. I think it's like when you've been like a baby for so long and then suddenly your parents are having a new kid and you're like, excuse me, what?
I'm with everyone else now.
Like now I have like, I don't know, responsibilities and like I'm technically seasoned and have like experience. Like it doesn't feel like it. I can tell you that.
Yeah. I bet it does not. Like I said, I still feel very much like a debut author. And I'm like, wait, I've been here doing this for 5 years at this point. But I did want to kind of talk about your journey because I think, Arsenic and Noble was such a huge success. I'm so proud of that. I think I will definitely say it's probably definitely the biggest cozy of last year. I want to say probably one of the biggest mystery novels of last year. And I think sometimes people see that and they assume that you're an overnight success because it was your debut. But I know you've had quite the journey. So can you kind of talk a bit about what your journey was like to get to that point, to the Agatha and Lefty nominations?
So those of you, again, one of the weird things about video is I can see myself and I'm like, man, my face is very loud. Because when you said the word success, I literally went, because again, you probably felt the same way. Like I said, your debut year, you swept, but like, people on the outside are like, oh, it's so successful. And they think, and it's hard for me to feel that. Not because I'm not proud of that book. Like I'm immensely proud of it, but it just always feels like, particularly as a writer, like your goalposts keep on moving.
Yeah.
So it's so hard to really like feel successful. Like when you're starting out, you're like, oh my God, let me finish a book. This is so hard. And you do it, right? And then you're like, okay, like now I need an agent. And then you do it. And then you're like, oh, let me sell this book. And you just keep moving that post further and further. And then, when you debut and you're like, oh, my dream is coming true. Everything's going to change. And then like, it's just a Tuesday and, and everyone's life keeps on, the way it was before. You're like, oh, you know, like this is an amazing job, but it's a job, and life goes on, and you have to kind of keep on doing that. So, you know, whenever people describe me as a success, I'm always just like, but am I? Weird.
Yes,
I don't know how I feel about that, you know?
You are a success.
But, you know, but as you said, like some people, you know, particularly because I was very, very lucky that it was chosen for book of the month. So like I heard things like, oh, I saw your book everywhere, which was like, yay. But yeah, you know, it probably seems like an overnight success because it's your first book, and you know, if it's your first book, obviously it must be the first one you've ever written.
Right.
But you know, Kellye here is, you know, I've been telling her that she's my mentor, and she's been there for me almost from the very beginning.
I think I met you when you won she has several different, like she's won several grants and awards before. So I met you when you had won the Malice, the William Deeck Award at Malice. We first met.
Back in 2017.
5 years in the game too.
Yeah, you know, and I was, you know, I've been writing since 2015.
Right.
You know, I started like my very first novel in 2015. I took my very first writing class ever in 2015.
Was that Lori's class?
With Lori, yeah, with Lori Rader Day. She is a Chicago author. She was teaching a one-day mystery writing class, and at that time, I didn't think I was going to be a mystery writer.
I was going to say, but you read mysteries growing up, right?
Oh yeah. Like I've always been a mystery fan, but mysteries just seem so hard, you know. Like I love the puzzle aspect of it, but like the idea of having to do it myself seems like really daunting. You know, like I always thought I would do like kid lit or fantasy. But you know, I just
you don't think like, to me, creating a whole world with fantasy is daunting, right?
I know, but like there's no rules though, you know. Someone can't be like, oh, you know, like that's where I'm just like, how would you know? It came out of my imagination. Whereas like, you know, if someone uses a gun in a mystery, there's gonna be someone out there letting me know I did it wrong. You know, like if I you know, if I you know, I'm sure I've got legal things wrong and people have yelled at me about it, and I'm just like, I'm sorry. Like I was an English major. I don't know.
It's not a legal law book.
I could. I talked to people. Any mistakes are my own, but I really did try. You know, like I wasn't, you know, throwing them out all willy-nilly, but yeah, so like, you know, in that class, Lori, you know, saw what I had started, and she was like, I think you've got something here. You know, I think you're a mystery writer. She was the one who told me about the Malice Domestic grant, actually. Like she sent me an email about it. For those of you who don't know, Malice Domestic is a pretty big like mystery convention that's dedicated to traditional mystery, which is what I write. And they have a special grant for unpublished writers, like up and coming traditional mystery writers. And, you know, I didn't think I was going to win, but it was free. I figured, why not? Submitted those first few chapters of the novel in progress I was working on at the time. And a few months later, I found out I won. And part of it was that they have this big award ceremony called the Agathas. And, you know, as the grant winner, I was allowed to give a speech there.
It's a great speech.
And so, you know, I gave my speech. And shortly after that, you know, people were lovely. They were thanking me. And then an up and coming debut writer named Kellye Garrett introduced herself to me. And you know, I think you sound like I like what you had to say, like in your speech.
Yeah, you did a great
about, like,
speech.
Diversity and
diversity,
and stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think I clapped or something, but in the middle, I was like, "Yeah, girl." Preach.
Yeah. So you know, so Kellye walked up to me and she introduced herself, and she was like, "Oh, hey, you know, I'm part of this organization called Pitch Wars. It's a mentorship thing. Is your book done?" And it wasn't at the time. She's like, "Well, we only accept, you know, finished manuscripts. So if you finish by X date, make sure to apply to me because I would love to read it." And so like that gave me the push I needed to like finally finish this thing I'd been working on for like 2.5 years. I applied, she chose me, and like she's been stuck with me ever since.
People like laughed at me, all the other mentors that year, because I chose you before you submitted, and I was getting mad because you were like talking to other mentors. I was like, "Why are you talking to her? Oh my god, she's mine." And then I actually did a deal with, I think, Robin's. So I was like, "I'll stay away from hers if you stay away from Mia." So I
remember like I got a DM from like another like mentor I had applied to, and they were like, "Oh, I really enjoyed your story, but like Kellye just loved it so much, I didn't feel right,
they were
going for more. But congratulations, you know, like after obviously the picks were made, she was like, "Yo, congratulations!" And I was like, "Kellye,
whatever." I'm not gonna apologize for that one. Let's get into the book. Homicide and Halo-Halo. So it centers around a beauty pageant. And so one of the things I love when I read it, you mentioned that the surest way to draw a large Filipino crowd was a viewing party for a beauty pageant, basketball game, or a boxing match. So is that where the initial idea came from? And why did you not do basketball game or boxing matches? Why did you choose beauty pageant?
Yeah, I mean, like I joke about this, but it's honestly kind of true that like I was thinking it's like, okay, what does small town America and the Philippines have in common? They love them some beauty pageants. And I really love Miss Congeniality,
yes,
and like Drop Dead Gorgeous. Like I knew it was like a setting that was ripe for like drama and murder, and like for me to like touch on a lot of things.
Yeah.
And so, in this book also, I got to be, like I was a little bit on my soapbox. I'm not gonna lie about it. I'm not gonna apologize, because I also felt like I could touch on other things about like Filipino culture and like colonial standards of beauty and like colorism and like some of like the in-baked misogyny and like forced rivalry between girls and young girls and women and things like that, and even like generational trauma and how like how it's kind of like forced passed down from like your parents and beyond that.
I think that's funny because I was actually going to ask about this later, because you do have this author's note in the beginning where you kind of admit that you were in a darker place, right, when you wrote this, and that you kind of cover things. And I was curious, like, why were you in the dark? Was it like because of like the pandemic, or just the second book fears? Like, what was it?
It was 2020 was 2020 was a year for everybody, but like for me personally, I wrote about it. So like I wrote about it on like the Wicked's author blog, if you guys are familiar with that. I talked about second book syndrome.
Yeah.
So for me, everyone had a rough 2020 global pandemic. But I also had to deal with job insecurity. I got laid off. Like my entire Chicago branch of the school that I worked at, we all got laid off literally the same day I received my contract for this book. So when I say this journey's been like a roller coaster, I am like, I'm not exaggerating. I was just like, oh my God, it's real. Wait, what? I don't have a job anymore. It was so like job insecurity, and then I thought like, oh, well, maybe this is a sign that I should be a full-time author. And at that time, having no job security, and then now having the pressure of having to write a second book on deadline. Because I'm not we've talked about stuff, like I'm kind of a slow-ish writer for like genre, but cozies tend to come out 8 or 9 months apart. They get put out pretty quickly.
I could not do it.
I know, which readers love, but it kind of takes a toll. And so for me, again, I said like my first book took about 2.5 years. Arsenic and Adobo took about 1.5 years while I was getting rejected on my first book. I was writing the second one, but this one, I had a very tight deadline. It was technically, I think, maybe 9 months that I had to write the second book. Jeez. But it's not like I had like 9 straight empty months of nothing. I was like job hunting. I was I was editing the first book while promoting the first book and trying to write the second book. And then I was also dealing with things I hadn't have to do, like expectations, pressure I was putting on myself to succeed, because this book is technically an experiment, with the Berkeley line, like the millennial cozy line. And it's super unfair. And we've talked about this also. We can talk about it a little bit more later, but I didn't want to be used as the excuse for if my book did poorly. I didn't want them to be able to point at my books and be like, oh, we tried that with X and it didn't sell. So clearly people don't want, millennial cozies or cozies by people of color or, XYZ. I didn't want to be that excuse.
Right.
I also knew Filipino American representation is so rare in mainstream media. And I didn't, all these people I saw were super excited by this book that hadn't even come out yet. And I was writing the second book and I was just like, oh God, now people are actually, anticipating my writing, where before I was only writing for me. And so it built and it built and it built, and it was rough. It really was.
But you survived.
I did it.
You did.
It's real. It happened.
There's proof. How long did it take you to write the third one?
I'm sorry?
The third book. How long did it take?
The third book, I think I I had a month less because book 3 actually comes out this year. It comes out in October.
Oh, wow.
And they pushed up the release date. So it's coming out a month earlier than originally anticipated because it takes place around Christmas time, which one is a huge deal for Filipinos. So like, expect that. I think the Philippines has like the longest Christmas season in the world. I talk about it in the book, but like they start celebrating what they call the Burr months: September, October, November. Like they legit start celebrating in September.
Like, do they put a tree up in September?
They start with the music and the decorations and everything. They go all out.
It's not a day; it's literally like a whole season.
Yeah,
It's like all of winter and fall and fall.
yeah. Well, I mean, like in the Philippines, it's just hot year round, so there's no there's no American Thanksgiving either. So it's just like.
But like when after so December 26th though, is it completely done, or we're still celebrating Christmas?
I think there's also, because there is like the Feast of the Three Kings, which is like January 6th, which is also like, if you're like super Catholic or like another like a specific or other specific branches of like Christianity, like I think January 6th is like the official end of the Christmas season. Okay. So like it even continues on into the new year.
Let's talk about I love this series because family is such an important part of it. They play such a key role. Why was it so important for you to give her such a big family? And also one of the things you kind of talk about, and I talk about in my book too, it's like family's more than just blood relatives. You can have other types of family. So like, why was it so important to you?
Well, two things. One, and I'm glad you touched on that because I wanted to ask you something about that later. So hopefully I remember. So for me, I was born and raised in Chicago. I've only been to the Philippines a handful of times. And I didn't have a Filipino community growing up. I grew up in a majority Latina neighborhood, like 80+%, we were like we were one of the few Asian families around. And so for me, my connection to my culture is my family. Like so I grew up in a multi-generational household. My maternal grandparents, my parents, me, my 2 brothers, my cousins, sometimes aunt and uncles, people that I'm pretty sure were not blood related, but we were kind of like the way station where like if you were immigrating from the Philippines or like you needed a place to like become a little bit more stable before moving out on your own, we were that house. And so it's I was talking to someone earlier, like it's hard for me to separate like my heritage and my cultural background from what my family means to me. Right? To me, like they're one and the same. That's another reason I write about food so much, because for me, again, it's one of the few like tangible connections I have to the homeland and my culture. It's because it's what my father cooked. It's what my grandmother cooked. That's what it means to me. And then, as you said, it's not for the longest time growing up. I never questioned it because it was just like so like typical to me until I realized, when like me and my other friends would do the same thing. We're like, oh, that's my cousin, or that's my, and people would be like, oh, wow, you have such a big family. And they're like, oh, but like not blood, but like they're my cousin,
We call them play cousins, and Black people call them play cousins.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. That's my play brother. That's my play cousin.
like for the longest time, because like in the books, I have like the calendar crew who are her 3 godmothers. So like it's pretty normal, according to my mom, my parents, to have like multiple godparents, because like it's like, making connections and things like that. So I have 3 godmothers and 3 godfathers. My middle brother has 3 godmothers, 3 godfathers. So like we all
different people.
All different.
Okay.
But we all call them by the same all the same honorifics of Ninang or Ninong. And so like I don't actually know who my godmother or godfathers are. They all like there's just this mass of general godmothers and godfathers in my family, because like that's just who they are. It's so and it's so hard to explain that, like there are times where like like a copy editor will be like, oh, but you said that's they're not related by blood. Why does she keep calling them by this honorific? And it's just like, well,
I think it's
that's how it is. That's how we call people. Like family isn't only blood, and just because you're blood doesn't mean you're family either.
I think that's the same in my thing. Everyone was an aunt. Like I have so many aunts, and instead of like calling them like Miss Joyce or Mrs. Johnson, it was Aunt Joyce, you know. So
Mhm.
that's just what we do in our family too. So I think the black people are very similar to that.
Yeah, I love
So
your Aunt character, by the way.
actually based on my grandpa. We'll talk about that later. Did you have like any family members that like thought you were writing about them, and like were they right?
No, luckily no. Like my mom has read it, and she kind of like, I think she can maybe like see a hint of her mother, like, you know, my maternal grandmother, like in the Lola Flor character. But like in general, I tried to avoid that because I didn't want that drama.
But you
like,
know so many people, so how do you avoiding basing it off of anybody? You didn't take anything from anybody. You can tell us it's just us, and we won't tell your family. You didn't take a single thing from a single person.
Yeah, it's just like, you know, I was like, it's amalgamation. It's like I took this idea from this, or somebody said this, or, you know, like I didn't want that. Like, excuse me, this is clearly me, and I don't appreciate that, or like, you know, particularly because, you know, some of the things that are said are not always the nicest.
You talked about food already. So like, what is because I don't really cook that much. And it's so funny, like someone was asking me like for like a recipe one time for like a blog, and I was like, I don't have anything. So Valerie Burns had to like find me a recipe. So like, what is the process for you? Because you do test out, I know you test out all these recipes. Like, so how's like that process for you to figuring the recipes out? And is it as hard as writing the book, easier, harder? Like what is like, how does that work?
So for me, like the savory recipes, like the ones that her aunts make, like those are a little bit harder for me because I don't love cooking. I do enjoy cooking for other people though. It's, you know, it's very similar to the whole, like, you know, food is my love language. So like cooking for survival is the worst. It's, you know, like I just made lunch, now I gotta make dinner. Like I cooked yesterday, I gotta do it again. Like, ugh, I hate it. But I host the holidays. And so like making like the feast for my family, that for me is fun.
Okay.
You know, cooking for one or two people, you know, there's not really much I can do with that unless I'm like, oh, I guess I'm just gonna be eating this one dish every single day for a month, you know, kind of a thing. Or I'm eating eggs on toast, you know, like there's very little in between for me. But the baking I really, really enjoy. It's my favorite way to procrastinate from writing because I'm just like, oh, I'm not procrastinating. It's research, right? Like readers love these recipes. I have to include them. I have to nail them right. And like if I have like, you know, a dozen cookies or a whole ass cake at the end, cool. All right. You know, that's my reward.
Do like a lot of readers do the recipes and send you pictures?
Yeah, that's actually one of my favorite things. Like, I'm like, oh wow, you actually like trusted me and tried out.
You're still alive. You're still alive.
Well, some of them are like, I've never had Filipino food in my life, so I wanted, you know, but it sounded so good, I had to try it. And I was like, oh, my recipe was your very first taste of Filipino food. That's so cool, you know.
That's awesome. And then was this the original title?
This one, yes. So like, titles are rough.
Yeah, they are.
So with Arsenic and Adobo, Kellye knows it was not like that was not my original title. I had queried it and sold it under Love, Loss, and Lumpia. Lumpia being another Filipino food. And my editors were like, that's a cool title, but it doesn't really sound mystery enough. And I agreed with them, you know, like when you hear, especially for a debut, like when you see a title in print or you hear someone say it out loud, it should kind of tell you what it's about. And, you know, if you hear Love, Loss, and Lumpia, I'm like, oh, is that like a book about grief? Is it like a one woman's journey? You know, like it almost, and I'm like, oh yeah, I wanted something very clear. And so I started thinking of like, you know, cozy naming tropes. And like, it's kind of hard to pun with Filipino food, right? There's not really something. So I'm like, okay, crime word, Filipino food. And I had a bunch of different, you know, combinations, and Arsenic and Adobo was the one that my editors chose. But so after that, it's been super easy because like now I have a template. Right. It's always crime word and alliterative food word, and that's all it is.
So what's the third book?
I'm sorry?
What's the third one gonna be?
Blackmail and Bibingka.
Okay. Do you have a fourth one already? Because you do.
Murder and Mamon.
You guys, there's gonna be at least 3 more of these since you signed a new deal. What is the third one?
Murder. The third one is Blackmail and Bibingka.
No, the fourth one. I'm sorry.
Oh, Murder and Mamon.
You have to do one with like kill.
I know. I already have like an idea for that, like one of my favorite dishes, so we'll see. I actually have like more potential titles than books that I could possibly write. And I'm like, all right, I can do this. You know, if I start writing another series, then I'm back to the drawing board. But for this one, this template is great.
It's great because you also know like at least one of the dishes that you're going to include in it, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like I actually, when we changed the title to Arsenic and Adobo, I actually had to do some like revisions. I'm like, oh man, I mentioned arsenic. Arsenic should show up. You know, kind of. Well, because like in the original draft, it was like vague poisoning, and so this time I was like, oh, cool. Like I actually have like, you know, like something to research specifically and make it feel a little bit more real. So like that was actually kind of cool.
That's funny. It's funny to see because it is a business. Publishing is a business, to see like what impacts your creative process. Like I have a friend who got our cover and she had a pool on it. She goes, I guess I have to put a pool in my book now because there is no pool in it. So it's things like that where it's like small things like that. And I think the cover for Hollywood Ending didn't look anything like my character. So I had to like write a scene where she looked kind of like the way she looks in the book cover. Yeah. So things like that are so funny to me. Let's talk about diversity. As you kind of mentioned earlier, you are, you know, you're out doing millennial stuff. We all can know that there's not a lot of diversity in crime fiction, especially in cozies, although the last couple years have definitely changed that. Like, what are your thoughts on that? Are you excited about it? I'm a little nervous. What about you?
Cautiously, possibly even naively optimistic.
Yeah.
When I mentioned like my first book, it got me my first agent. I'm with a different agent now. Like that one didn't sell. And one of the most common pieces of feedback I got was that my young queer Filipino character had no audience. That, you know, and I say this like I think I can't remember if it was an editor or one of the salespeople, like they straight up said that traditional mysteries audience is older white women and nobody's gonna buy this. That was 2018, you know, like it wasn't that long ago. And I'm glad that publishing is like slowly seeing that they're wrong, that clearly like if you acquire the good books and you market them, right? It's not enough that they buy the books, that you have to push them. Like I have been, you know, I keep using the word luck, and I don't want people to think that I'm like kind of devaluing my own talent, but a lot of publishing is luck. You know, you could have written the best book, but if your publisher isn't putting any marketing dollars behind it, people are not going to hear about it. People can't buy what they don't know exists.
Right.
So I've been lucky that they were pushing it and people were finding out about it who, you know, maybe traditionally don't even read mysteries. A lot of my readers, I've been getting messages saying like, I didn't even know cozy mysteries existed, or like, I've never really read mystery much, but this seemed like such a cool concept. I'm trying it out, you know, like things like that.
But I also kind of feel like, I think because they try to ghettoize cozies and say, oh, it's just for older white women, I feel like a lot of them, they probably don't even try to market them towards other people, you know. And I think for my book, I was told my series, not my new one, my Hollywood Homicide, was not a cozy. Don't call it a cozy, and I thought it was a cozy because it was an amateur detective and it was a funny book and a lighter book, but don't call it a cozy because I did not have the tropes that a lot of the books had, like the small town and the hook and the this and the that. And so it's a shame that it seems like they weren't trying to market it. And I'm glad that they are finally trying to market it beyond. There's nothing, obviously, because I think those readers could enjoy books like that too, both of our books, you know? So
it's funny, you know, like, you know, I think we talked about like how silly it feels like using the term like edgy cozy, because like that's kind of like not what cozies are. But like, again, yours were like the perfect cozy mold. They were so funny. There was no swearing on the page. There was no graphic sex or violence. They were exactly what cozy readers are looking for, but with an unconventional main character. And I think that's what it is more than anything. Like there was nothing in your, you know, that a cozy reader would be like, oh, this isn't what I signed up for. Like, no, it's all marketing.
Yeah, it really is. It really, really, really is. How do you feel pressure because you are writing about a Filipino American character who you don't see a lot on the page? do you feel pressure in how you discuss race in the books, how you discuss your culture in the books?
Yeah, absolutely. One, because, as I mentioned, I didn't grow up with a large community. What I know is my family and the research I've done and, some friends that I have. So there's always the idea of like, am I getting it right? Am I, how much of my own implicit bias, because we all have it, is showing up on the page, and how can I combat that? So, with Arsenic and Adobo, even though I'm a Filipino American writing a Filipino American character, I still hired a Homeland Filipino like sensitivity reader to make sure that I was doing what I can to make sure I was providing like a well-rounded, objective, as objective as I can, because everyone's taste is subjective. There's no true objectivity there. Of how I was presenting like the range of the Filipino experience, and and her feedback was so helpful, particularly with some of the older, even though she was like the same age as my protagonist, which was also helpful because I'm not the age of my protagonist.
She's younger than you. Want to clarify
she's
that.
Much younger than me,
yeah.
Like a decade younger than me. But she was able to give me an insight to the older generation, because again, I was born and raised in Chicago, but like the Tita Rosie character, the calendar crew, and especially the grandmother, they all immigrated. So they have a different experience of what it means to be Filipino and what it means to be American than Lila does. And so her feedback helped me make those characters a little bit rounder. It helped me be a little bit more empathetic, where before I was maybe a little bit more judgmental because I was coming from my own perspective and how I felt about certain things that were being said or done. And so I was just like, oh, okay. No, I see where you're coming from. Let me see what I can do with this. So, and it's one of those things where like, yeah, because there's, like this will be the first time some people have ever read a Filipino character in their life,
right?
And I didn't want to be that person where like, oh my God, am I reinforcing stereotypes? Am I, again, is this book in a tank? And suddenly like, it's going to be super hard for a fellow like Filipino American, writer in my imprint to try and make it. So like, there's all these things that were just compounding and making it, really hard that we shouldn't have to deal with.
Right. The joy of being a writer of color. I think the other thing is, I feel like a lot of times, white readers in the media, they, want us to just write about like racism, and they want to kind of read about our pain and only our pain. And I think books about race and racism are super important, but also I think books like yours and mine, which are people of color they are definitely culturally this group of people, like, but it's not a focus on that, it's just because I think about us, like, I don't honestly on a day-to-day basis, I don't deal with racism. Do I deal with microaggressions a lot? Yes, I do, but I don't deal, no one's like calling me the N-word or whatever, but I'm still very much a Black woman, and like we're talking about, like, there's certain cultural elements that make me a Black American woman, and trying to make sure that those are in the book, right? I think you do such a great job of that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, like I try to say, and you nailed it, right? It shouldn't just be about our pain. It shouldn't just be about our trauma. Yeah. Like we should get stories where we just get to be.
Yeah.
Again, like your story, yeah, there's pain, but it's not pain because she's a Black woman. It's pain because, she loses her sister who she's been estranged with, and she can't really accept the story that people are feeding to her that, it was an overdose. Oh, she was just, oh, poor little rich girl, like the pain is from being a human and having these human connections and not being able to deal with the grief. Which I mentioned to you, like, oh, this is a common theme in both of our books. It's like, how is this character handling this grief or not?
Right.
And how much of it is like, how much of their coping mechanisms are because of like these enforced, ways of being due to their cultural backgrounds. Like, you exploring like the idea of like the strong Black woman.
Right.
Yeah. Really, really fascinating, because it's one of those things where like, oh, that seems like such a positive thing, right? That's a positive state, but at the same time, again, I keep using the word pressure. There's so much pressure that you have to stay strong, you have to pull through, you have to be a certain way, you can't let people see your weakness, and that just seems, it's so exhausting to always have to be on.
Yeah, no, I think it's funny because it's so innate in me, that strong Black woman, and it's my mom, it's my aunt, it's my sister, it's probably my niece too. Like, she's definitely, out of her and her brother, the stronger one. But I didn't, in the first draft, I did not put that on. I never said strong Black woman. And so my editor is a white woman, and she was just kind of like, she didn't quite understand why my main character is reacting a certain way to certain things. And I was like, this because that's that strong Black woman thing, you know? And so when I did the next draft, I called it the super Black woman, and I kind of made it more of something kind of weaved into it. And I think that's the tricky thing for me. And I'm actually curious about that with you, is like how you decide, like, how much stuff do you explain culturally and how much stuff do you like let people assume. Like, I have a line where she says that she was like, taming her edges, and I was like, Black people will get this. I'm not explaining this. Like, I put a note, like, do not ask me to explain this. I'm not, but then I will explain like the strong Black woman, and I know like Raquel Reyes talks about that a lot because she uses a lot of Spanish in her books. It's kind of like, what Spanish words do you have to explain, and what do you, one, just say you're not going to get it, and two, do you just try to use the context clues? So, like, how do you handle that?
Yeah, that's such a good question, because it's something I do struggle with all the time. It's like, how much hand holding should we have to do?
Yeah.
Because, like I am understanding that for a lot of people, like, Filipino culture is not something that they're familiar with, because again, it's not in the mainstream a lot. So why would they know so much? But at the same time, Google exists, context clues exist, and there are some things where I feel like there are things that are so deeply ingrained. It's like if you know, you know,
right?
And if it's not something that has to be spelled out for you to fully understand, then maybe I won't. But if it's something like, okay, like you genuinely would not get this scene if I don't explain a couple of the things. Because, like, one of the things that people ask me, and like, I get where they're coming from. It's not an upsetting question, but it's just like an interesting one. It's just like, oh, what do you want people to learn about Filipino culture from your books? And it's just like, they're murder mysteries. I don't know. Like, what I mean, they're not textbooks.
Right.
But
I think Jasmine Guillory has said that in like a Time article where like someone was like, you missed the opportunity to teach me about racism. And it's like, that's not my job to teach you about racism. Like, it's not. Like, read a textbook. Talk to your uncle who's racist. Like, don't ask me.
Yeah, right? Like, I don't. So, I don't like, who goes, Stephen King, like, oh, what do you want us to know about what it's like to be a white man in America?
A rich,
you know what I mean? Like,
rich,
what?
successful white man.
What? Like, I don't know, especially with books like ours, where like, yes, we are saying things, and yes, our character, like, I think the one thing that's important is that like our characters are not just like, oh, they could be any race, but they happen to be like, no, like we kind of take care to like layer certain things where like it informs who they are. Right. It is part of who they are. It's not all they are.
Right.
But like it shows up in various ways throughout our book.
Right.
So yes, there are things that you can kind of learn, like we talked about like the super Black woman, and the way Lila deals with her grief is the way like, a lot of Asian families, my family, like we don't talk about feelings. We work hard. We keep our head down. We work hard. We don't make waves, and then things will get better. We'll get what we deserve. Hard work will. The hard work means you'll get what you deserve, and the meritocracy of it all. So
do you personally try to make a point not to buy into that? I'm sure it must be hard because it's so like I know for me, like it can be hard to break that, to be vulnerable. Mm-hmm. So like, is that hard for you to break that?
I think so, because it's one of those things, like, especially like in the book, my character Lila's dealing with like events from book one, and then unresolved grief from her mother's death when she was a child.
Right. Her mother's death is such a big part of this book, and her mother.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like it's something that she's pushed out, because again, her mother died when she was very young. But like this beauty pageant, because her mother was a deceased beauty queen, and the reason she's part of the beauty world is because of her mother. So it brings up these things that she keeps like, nope, don't want to touch that, until it finally like erupts. And so it's one of those things where, again, I feel like, modern day, it's like she has no problem with the idea of therapy for other people. You know, other people can reach out for help, and that makes sense because other people need help. She doesn't need help. She is doing fine. You know, it's one of those you know, she's there are times where she can be very self-aware, and I feel like, you know, a lot of people can be like that. You know, I can be like that sometimes. We're like, oh, hello, I'm doing great, whatever, and then people are just like, are you? You know, like my husband will be like, are you sure? Because your anxiety has been a little. I'm like, I'm fine. We're fine. You know, and again, it's not the idea that help is wrong. It's that I shouldn't need it. It's fine for other people, but I can handle it on my own.
I think we should open up for questions, but do you think you would be friends with Lila?
Ooh, I mean, if she bakes me stuff, sure. It's one of those like,
she'd feed you well, go to her house.
You know, my husband will say this, and you know, some people who like maybe only know online will be a little bit surprised, but like as the eldest daughter in an immigrant family, I very much have like mothering instinct, which is funny because like I don't want kids, but probably because I mother everyone else in my life. So I have like those so like I think I would see her and I'd be like, oh, baby, you sweet summer child, let me help you.
Before we get into questions and bring John back, could you just give us a preview of the third book, which comes out in October, which is my birthday month? So good birthday gift for me. So what's going on in the third book? Just a little hint.
So as I mentioned, in the third book takes place around Christmas time, and so Lila's cousin Ronnie, who I've mentioned briefly in both of the books, he ghosted the family about, I think it's 15 years ago, and he suddenly shows up in Shady Palms again. And, you know, as Tita Rosie's only child, she is absolutely overjoyed that he's back. She thinks that, you know, they can be a family again, but Lila's not having it. She knows that wherever he goes, trouble follows. And of course, she's right. When the family not only starts getting blackmailed with vague references to something that he did in the past, but one of his investors at the winery he's opening up is murdered, and he becomes the main suspect.
He's here to stay. He comes back and open a winery. Okay, that sounds good. I can't wait to October to come out. So
yeah, that's great because it involves a winery. I got to go to a winery for research and write that out.
I love it. Anything else you want to say before we open up for questions? I know you said you had a question for me.
Oh man.
No, it's fine. We'll talk about it. You can ask me later privately. Hi, John.
Hello. So before we get into crowd questions, we've got some good ones. Kellye, can you tell everybody a little bit about Like a Sister?
I wish I had she had such a great little pitch for her book. So Like a Sister is about sisters. And it's about Lena Scott, who hasn't talked to her sister, who is a disgraced reality star in 2 years. And she finds out one day that her sister has died from a drug overdose. And she died because she was shooting up heroin, and her sister is afraid of needles. So she automatically thinks something happened to her. And I got the idea from a daily news headline about a Black reality star who had been partying it up for her birthday in downtown Manhattan and somehow ended up dead on a street corner in the Bronx. Oh, you have it too. Yay. Yes. And I just was like, how did this glamorous reality star go from partying it up in downtown Manhattan to being by herself and dying in the Bronx? And I can remember I was walking down the street one day and I go, oh, she went to see her sister and she never made it. So that's kind of what the book's about, is that like Lena realizes that Desiree was coming to see her and she didn't make it. And she wants to know what had happened in these past 2 years that she's now dead. So that kind of has her dive into this world that she's kind of forgotten about with her dad. Her dad's a hip hop mogul, and it's a lot of Instagram in there and a lot of fun stuff like that. It's a fun beach read, I think. So.
It's perfect. Super good. I had to put it off for a while because, as I said, I'm a slow writer and I like just turned in my edits. So I read like literally 60 to 70% of it last night in one sitting. And I was like, oh my God, Kellye.
She was like sending me notes about it. I love
getting better. Her best book yet. And like, I loved her original series for the lightness and the humor, but I think this like just takes it to another level.
Thank you. Yeah, it's more like domestic suspense, but it still has humor. It's still like a lighter book. Like it's not going to have any, deep, like, the abuse or torture or anything like that. So it's still a fun book. So
perfect. So that comes out March 1st, and we're going to be doing
March 8th. Sorry.
March 8th.
Yeah.
They have not. Okay, so March 8th, thank you. And we will be doing that evening. Kellye will be chatting with Sarah DeVello here on all of our socials. So make sure you keep an eye out for that. So we do have some great questions. Barbara wants to know, and Barbara Reyes was our winner. She's got some great questions tonight. So she's going to email me at order@murderbooks.com, and she's going to win a copy of both books. But she wants to know, well, for both of you, if you weren't writing mysteries, what other genre do you think that you would be writing? How about you, Mia?
Ooh, so I know earlier I mentioned like killer fantasy, but lately I have been super into romance.
Yeah.
And I honestly think romance might be a little bit harder to write because you got to keep the tension and the stakes.
Yeah.
Like, how do you make something so seemingly low stakes, like, oh, will these people fall in love or not? Whatever, you know, like where an outside observer doesn't care. How do you make them care? Whereas me, I'm just like, oh man, things are lagging. Second dead body. You know, like I'm like, I don't know how to write books without dead bodies, but I'm really, I would love to try writing a romance, an adult romance.
Yeah, I think the same. I think with Hollywood Homicide, there's like a subplot with her, this kind of guy that she has had a crush on, and they're not talking anymore. People really liked it, and an editor suggested I write a romance one day, and of course I was like, never. But if I was not writing mystery, I think I would probably have to write romance as well. So
I feel like there's a good, like in the Venn diagram of genres, I think cozy and romance overlap in a really fun way because you always get that, you know, and it ends up, are they going to get together in this book? At what point are these characters going to get together? So I think there's a lot of overlap in the two. I've actually recently gotten into reading more romance too. And same thing, I'm always surprised at like how like you keep that tension and like, you know, they're going to end up at the end, but like you have to know how you're going to get there.
Yeah, I think
people care. I'm just like, oh.
Yeah. I think a lot of cozy readers used to love romance, and they said it got a little too steamy, so they moved over to cozy. So that's probably also why it's a lot of overlap.
So Kellye, Monique wants to know, are we ever going to see Dana Anderson again?
I am so sorry, Monique. Right now there is a third book, and it's about 3/4 done, and it's a file on my computer, and it's going to be a file for a little bit longer. I would love to revisit just because I'm curious what they're doing, you know, and also I started the book 10 years ago, and so I'm a different writer too. So I think Dana would be in a different place, and I would be in a different place. So maybe one day, but for right now, you're going to be just stuck with this one. I'm sorry.
This is a great question from Christina for both of you. So we'll start with Mia. What are some writing milestones that you celebrate, and how do you celebrate them?
Ooh. So I've been, so for this year, like one of like my words is celebrate. And again, Kellye and I talked about this a million times. We're like, it's so hard to enjoy it when it's in the moment. You know, like your debut year, you feel, you know, you should be enjoying so many things, but I spent so much of it overwhelmed that I felt like I didn't truly appreciate what an amazing experience, like what an amazing, like I did it, you know. I wrote a book and it's being published and people are reading it, and it's good. And I just never, like, I was just always never like, oh, I got to finish book 2. Oh, now that I finished book 2, I got to write book 3. Oh, and so now I'm trying to slow down and be like, you know, I said, oh, I turned in my edits today. Yay. Once it's transmitted, that means I get paid, you know.
A true celebration.
You know, even small things like one of my editors, like Angela, she's really great. Like she highlighted something, and, you know, and like she'll be like she'll actually say like how funny something was, or like, oh man, this really like got me, like it got me in the feels. You like there's like just little comments where I'm like, oh, my editor gets it, you know, like she didn't just acquire my book to be nice, like she truly likes my writing. So like things like that.
Yeah, I think for me it's same, like small milestones, like, and so like most recently, like if you guys know Drew from Drew's Book Musing, she read my book and she did not expect the killer, and like Drew reads so many books, like with Hollywood Homicide, she knew who the killer was, so the fact that I stumped Drew, that's a milestone for me. And I think the next one is my finished author copies are coming tomorrow. Very and cool. I have not seen them, but for some reason there are people on the internet, they came in on a Friday. Some woman had it on a Monday, and so I've only seen pictures, and I started crying when I saw the pictures. I think tomorrow will be a nice celebration when I actually see the final copies. So
very cool. And going with that, Mia, I completely agree with Kellye, what she said early on, that getting nominated for the awards is also a huge thing. There are so many books that get published. Getting nominated it's so amazing. It's definitely something that you should celebrate and shout out. Whether you get the award or not, I can't say as an author, not being nominated, but getting nominated, it makes a lot of difference to readers too. If you can put a book in somebody's hand and say like, oh, this was even just nominated for an award, there's something there. So you should definitely celebrate that stuff too.
Yeah, and it's really special because, you know, with those, like with the Lefty and the Agathas in particular, like those are write-ins. Like people like the actual readers have to write in and nominate the book themselves. So it's, you know, I don't have that many friends in the writing community. So like obviously other people that I don't know personally wrote in and voted for my book to get me on that nomination slate. So it's just like, wow, thank you all so much.
You really liked me.
Kellye like gaming the system and voting for me like 20 times.
Don't tell anybody, dang. Our secret.
Okay, so Mia Barbara wants to know, she says, as a fellow Filipina, she can relate to the importance of Filipino food. So she's curious to know if the foods that you mentioned in the titles of the books, do those have significant meanings or special meanings to you for you to use them in the titles?
For some of them, yeah. So like with adobo, I went with it because, you know, it's considered the national dish of the Philippines. I'm like, you know, it's the first book in the series. How could I not choose one that's like so important to Filipino identity? You know, halo-halo, that's technically like our national dessert, you know, and it also takes place in the summertime. So like, how would I not choose this, you know, the shaved ice dessert that's pretty well known. With the third one, bibingka, I chose that specifically because it's a rice cake that's traditionally served around Christmas time. And so like, since the setting is around Christmas, you know, I wanted to make sure that it reflects that as well. So like in some ways, like I choose a title. I'm like, oh, I hope I can write this into it. But then at the same time, I'm like, oh, looking back, even though I chose that title before I even, you know, came up with much, it actually thematically works with what I'm trying to do. Yeah. So I'm trying to kind of keep that in mind as I move forward too.
Completely frivolous question. There have been a couple of comments, Mia, about your stylish room that you're in. So Christina wants to know, are your walls actually painted purple or you just have purple curtains or both?
Oh, no, it's painted purple, but I think it's this is my office. It's a tiny alcove. Sorry if you get motion sickness, but I'm trying to show you. So like, again, like those are my front windows. That's my, like, this is how small, that's my office. It's literally as wide as you can see the screen. So because it's such a small space, I was like, I'm going to make it fun. So I painted it my favorite color.
Very cool. Let's scroll down through here. What is something that you guys have read lately that you've loved? And you can't say each other's books. Let's start with you, Kellye.
So I read Amina Akhtar's Kismet, which I think comes out later this year. She's just really good with kind of like skewering a whole industry. She did Fashion Victim, which was about obviously the fashion world. And so this is about like the wellness industry in Sedona. And it's just like really funny. And it's just kind of this really great satire, but also a really great mystery as well. I really enjoyed that one. Gigi Pondian has Under Lock and Skeleton Key. And Gigi's kind of like the modern day queen of locked room mysteries. And so this one is a locked room mystery where a body is found in a wall, and it's someone that she knows. And so it's just like a great book. So those are two I really enjoyed recently. So
yeah, I have to echo Gigi's as well. Like I got a little bit into it because again, like I wanted Kellye's first because we were doing our talk, and then I started on Gigi because again, like the idea of impossible crimes, like, you know, as much as I love mystery, it's like the hardest part for me to write. Yeah. Like my editor is always like, hey, Mia, this family drama is great, but can you put like, I don't know, more investigation? I'm like, ooh, fair. So like reading someone like Gigi, where it's like, it's so perfectly integrated, like it doesn't get in the way of like the character and their journey, but just perfectly integrated to the story itself is so cool to see. And I recently got to read an early copy of Valerie Burns' new culinary cozy. I think it comes out in August. Kellye, is it like 2 parts sugar, 1 part murder?
Yeah, something like that, or one. Yeah.
It's a millennial. That's a lot of fun. You know, again, I love me, you know, some BIPOC cozies, you know, by crime writers of color. And I'm starting a new one too. I'm also reading this for a blurb. Island in the Sun by Olivia Matthews, another fellow crime writer of color. And it's a woman who reconnects with her family to open like a West Indies themed bakery. So she gets to kind of explore like her heritage in that way. And I'm like, ooh, this is like fun and new to me and very delicious sounding. So like, again, very early because I'm starting to blurb it, but like, I'm loving what I'm seeing so far.
Who's the publisher of that? Do you know?
Oh, that I don't
know. Valerie's is Kensington.
Okay.
Olivia's. Let me see what Olivia's is. It might not be. Let me see.
I'm not sure when it comes out, but
that might be with St. Martin, actually. That's like the cool thing now about like we're in the part of our careers where people like will send us books to like read, and I'm like, yay, free books! But also I'll get like rejected on NetGalley at the same time. So
I saw you say the other day.
I haven't read Kismet yet. I gotta slide into Amina's DMs and be like, girl, where? Like I know I don't have time, but I'm also very jealous. I
think it's coming out soon. But yeah, John, I just tweeted about how I got rejected, but then someone was like, you should just email the publicist. So I did, and she sent me the widget. So I'm like, okay.
If it makes you feel better, as a bookseller, I get turned down for stuff too, and I'm like, what? Like, I don't mean this to sound like this is going to sound, but it's like clearly you don't know who I am. Being
excuse me.
Like you know.
That's how I want to be like, how do you decide? Because like, yeah, maybe on NetGalley I don't leave a lot of reviews, but I literally will post on my 10,000 follower Twitter my books. So I'm like, I do try to help out here, people. So
my theory is, I think sometimes, and again, my theory, I'm not like casting aspersions on anybody. I think sometimes maybe they're just like, oh my gosh, there are just so many like requests. I'm just gonna like say no to everything and just start over again.
No, thank you.
That's my theory. That's what makes me feel better. I'll be like, wait, how does this publisher not have me auto approved? Come on, guys. Like, why am I?
Yeah. I have some that are and some that aren't. It's funny because luckily it seems like Mulholland has approved all my friends, because that'd be hella awkward if they were not approved. So I've been pretty lucky with that. So I will slide in a friend's DM and be like, your publisher rejected me. I will snitch on them.
So how do you guys balance reading stuff for blurbs or, reading things for friends like that with reading stuff that, and obviously a lot of the stuff that you're going to want to read for blurbs are like friends and things that you want to read anyway, but how do you balance that, which sometimes can feel like work, with just reading for pleasure for stuff that you want? Where's the balance there for you while also trying to find time to write?
I want to teach me. It's tricky. I think my problem is that I kind of mirror what I'm reading in terms of writing. So if I'm reading bad writing, I write bad. If I'm reading really good writing, I write good. So I try to read good writing, but at the same time, I don't want to like sound like them too, which is tricky. So I try to like write first and then I'll read after that, because if I read before I write, then I'm like trying to be like Attica Locke, which I cannot be like, so but if I can write I can be Kellye and then I'll read Attica Locke after I finish writing for the day. So
see, like I have a similar problem. So like when I'm drafting, I try not to read books in the same genre. So like, again, I write cozy mystery, so I try not to read any cozies, but like, which was fine when I wasn't an author, because I could take all the time, but like now it's just like, well, you got to know what's out there. You want to support your friends. You have, like I can't avoid cozies forever because I'm constantly writing. So that's one of the reasons I glommed onto romance so much, because I'm like, I miss reading, but I don't want other people's words in my head where, like you said, like I'm accidentally emulating them. And I don't want it to seem like, oh my God, like I'm stealing their ideas, So it really is tough. I'm getting better at it as I've gotten more efficient with my writing. But I really am very much like, while I'm very heavily into my drafting, I'm probably not reading. So like all my really close friends, I have so many arcs on my Kindle, and I'm just like, I'm sorry, I love you, I promise I'll post a review. I'm probably not going to get it anytime soon.
That's why I started posting pictures and just promoting like hardcore. Like I know people like another picture of you in a book, but it's because that's how I'm like, how can I support my friends or books I'm really excited about when I know I don't have time to like finish reading this right now or writing a review. So I'm like, oh, I just got this galley, can't wait to read it. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think it's fun to even just see like just to even see what other people are excited about, even if you haven't gotten to it yet. Especially people like you, Kellye, who I know, read voraciously and read widely. When you see something and then you start seeing other people, oh, I'm excited about that too. It's always, it's helpful to build buzz if you can't get to everything, because, there are only so many hours in the day.
Indeed.
So we talked about what you guys have coming up next. Somebody had a writing question. Are you guys plotters or pantsers?
Kelly made me a plotter.
Thank you. You're welcome.
I'm not as hardcore as Kelly. I will admit to that. Maybe if I was, I'd write a little bit faster, but I do plot in part because I have to, right? So because I write a series, I have to turn in what we call like a proposal. So I have to like a full synopsis. So I have to know the general story arc of everything that happens, including the ending, plus the opening chapters. And I give that to my editors for approval before I can write the whole book. So, I mean, I kind of have to. But
yeah, and I'm just a super plotter where I'll do like 25-page outlines, 3-act structure, and then I will always throw the 3rd act out before as I'm writing it. Because the blank page scares me, actually. I'm not I don't like writing. I like rewriting. So I need to have some kind of safety blanket in my outlines, my safety blanket.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and my editors and they like now again, now that we're on our 3rd book together, that I even said to them, like, I'm a slow drafter, so when I turn in my original draft to them, some parts of it are the first draft. Like I haven't even had a chance to revise it because like deadlines are deadlines. I can't make them late. Yeah. But I'm a pretty good reviser. Yeah, I can edit pretty deeply and pretty quickly. Once the idea is out and the blank page is not as scary, I know I can make it better. And they're like, oh, she's right. You turn in a messy draft, but when I ask you to make these changes, you go above and beyond. And I'm like, thank you.
Well, I call the first draft the vomit draft. So you spew it out on the page and then you clean it up later, right? That's how I call it. So.
All right, last question. Eliza Jane Brazier is tuning in, and she wants to know what is the best and worst writing advice you've ever been given? Let's start with Mia.
Oh God. I mean, I don't know if it was like write every day. I mentioned my earlier rejections where like I had no audience. Someone told me one of like the salespeople were like, oh, she should just write YA because that's where the diversity is. And again, I've said this before, that is not shade to YA. YA is its own edge category, and there are amazing books happening there. Particularly some really, really fantastic crime fiction. But the idea that like, oh, you're writing brown people for adults, oh, that's not going to sell. You should write in the YA space. It'll sell there. Was like, what? Excuse me? Yeah. So like not from a craft perspective, but from like the publishing industry perspective, I was like, how dare you? From the best, I guess like the idea that like you don't have like the rules are really guidelines. If it works for you, it works for you, and that's great. But like none of these are set in stone, so like don't feel like you have to write a certain way to be a real writer.
I think similar. I think I hate when people are like, if you don't write every day, you're not a real writer, which is BS. I don't write every day, and I'm a real writer. I don't write every day, and I would. It does if the words aren't coming, it's just going to be crap. It's a waste of my time. And I think my best advice is writing is rewriting.
Awesome. Well, to recap for anyone who might have joined us late, we have been chatting with Mia P. Manansala, whose newest book, Homicide and Halo-Halo, just came out on Tuesday. We've got signed book plates, stickers, and bookmarks to go with our copy. So if you order from us, and I've dropped links to those in the comments, you will get all of the swag that goes with it. And we've been also chatting with Kellye Garrett, whose new book, Like a Sister, comes out March 8th. If you have missed any part of our chat once we are done, Facebook and YouTube will archive them, so you'll be able to go back and rewatch. You can also check out some of our previous virtual events that we have done. I have a playlist that is specifically cozy mysteries. So if you want to see more of the cozy mysteries that we've been talking about, there's a whole playlist there for them. There's just a wealth of just hundreds of author events there that we hope that you guys will check out. Mia, it was so great to talk to you again. And Kelly, it was so good to see you too. Thank you guys so much for doing this with us tonight.
Thanks. You guys always do such amazing
Kelly, a reason to just hang out and chat.
You guys do such great events, and you guys, I think, were like among the first when the pandemic happened that were like jumped on this, and I'm so glad you guys are still doing it.
Thanks. Yeah, we want to keep trying to do a balance. Literally, the first one that we did, I had given whatever I think it was a HarperCollins publicist. We were trying to figure out how like Zoom to Facebook worked, and I literally was like, "Here's my personal Facebook login. Like, go in and fix this for us." Like, it was very like, let's get this up and running quick. So yeah, we're definitely not abandoning the virtual world once we start doing in-store stuff. We still get to love to do stuff like this and get to pair up people that maybe don't live somewhere geographically where they can get to us or get to us together. So this has been a blast. So you guys can, Mia, congratulations on the new book. Kellye, we're so excited for like a sister coming out. So you guys have a great night and we will see you soon.
I guess I'm going to go read, I think, Attica.
Good night, everyone. Thanks for joining us.